Yeah, even the phrase, yeah, for chapter 5, the title of chapter 5 is called The Rise of the Materialist Magician. And that phrase, materialist magician, I took from C.S. Lewis's book, Screw Tape Letters.
Hmm.
And famous book, for those that don't know, Screw Tape Letters is an epistolatory novel that takes the form of a series of letters that this demon, Screw Tape, writes to his nephew demon, Wormwood, right? And Wormwood is assigned a person to try to, damn to hell, right? To tempt and to enslave. And Wormwood asks Screwtape a question about whether or not it is the demon's policy to remain hidden or to reveal ourselves. And Screwtape responds that for now, our policy is to remain hidden, because if we reveal ourselves, then we cannot make materialist skeptics out of mankind. We, in other words, if we reveal ourselves, we kind of reveal the existence of the supernatural world. And we want to keep, I'm paraphrasing, obviously. In the book, I quote directly from Lewis. He says, we want to keep people in a state of materialist skepticism so that their mind will remain closed to belief in God, right? Which Screwtape calls the enemy, right? God is the enemy to these demons. And he says, so for now, our policy is to remain hidden. He's like, but we look forward to a time in the future when we can create a new kind of man, a materialist magician. And he's like, several developments on this front, may be promising on that regard. And the idea is to maintain in mankind a fundamentally materialist worldview, a skeptical worldview, but introduce elements of psychoanalysis and sexual obsession, and astrology and tarot card reading that invites man to engage with what he calls spiritual forces, while refusing to acknowledge the spiritual beings behind the forces. And he said, if we can achieve this amalgamation of the materialist on the one hand and the magician on the other, a secular rationalist who rejects God but accepts the existence of spirits or spiritual forces while not worshiping them, then we will have created the materialist magician. And if we can do that, then the end of the war will be in sight, the enslavement of humanity.
So they're able to have both sides.
Yes. So you would manage to hoodwink people into rejecting God, but accepting essentially worship of devils. And so I call the chapter The Rise of the Materialist Magician because I open it by talking about the growing popularity on social media, particularly TikTok, of witchcraft, and especially among young women right now. There's this burgeoning interest in witchcraft, but it's not like it's sort of like witchcraft for the TikTok set. I call it moral therapeutic paganism, right? Following Rod Dreher's moral therapeutic deism. And it's very much tied up with identity and feminism and, living your own best life, and sort of like this empowerment witchcraft, but it's, so it takes on the kind of the trappings of identity politics, identity affirmation and feminism, and female empowerment. But at the same time, they're opening themselves up to, real spiritual forces. And they believe, and they're not wrong to believe, that there's real power behind it, right? That can affect things in their life, their circumstances, in their world. And so they see themselves as tapping into a source of power, obviously, like in their mind for good, right? And even name like certain like familiars, and like will invoke pagan gods of the past. So like this one teenage girl in Texas that the Washington Post profiled a year and a half ago, is cites as her. She's a TikTok influencer, a witchcraft influencer, cites as her familiar Hecate, ancient Greek goddess.
Okay.
Right now,
so she's using that name as she does these things. Like that's part of her.
Yes,
rituals
and she's identifying Hecate as her like patroness or whatever.
Okay.
And her boyfriend is into this stuff too, and his familiar is Odin, right?
Okay.
The Norse god Odin. So they are explicit about the fact that they are like reaching out to these beings for like guidance, and they disclaim any notion that they're worshiping them. They're like, it's not like worship, it's more like, a partnership.
Yeah.
And it's like I couldn't have like come up with a better example of what Lewis was describing in the Screwtape Letters than what these like teenage young people were talking about as they described their practice of witchcraft.
Don't you say like in the piece they kind of even they still mock Christianity
Yes.
and organized religion, and they'll say, well, they've got that blind faith and they worship God and whatnot. So we're very rational. We don't buy any of that. But at the same point, they're still engaging in these spiritual things with gods. They don't call it worship because they want to still be in charge. But the point is that them being in charge is actually a facade, right?
Yeah, because they want to. Because just like Screwtape says, their mind is closed to belief in God, so they don't say what they're doing is praying to these creatures. That it's more that they're like journeying with them or whatever. What kind of therapeutic kind of narcissistic language that they employ there. But as I say in the book, whatever it is that they say they're doing, they are calling on a demon. So as Christians, we believe that stuff is real, and so, and by the way, like Hecate and Odin are not like nice figures. Like if you look them up, like these aren't harmless beings, right? Obviously. So these young people are getting, are falling into the trap that Lewis describes in the Screwtape Letters. And it's part of a larger process of kind of like, we talked about this in the last episode, the disfigurement of reason, because these same teenagers will say, oh, I'm not like, I'm not superstitious. I believe in I believe in science and stuff like that, but at the same time, I'm also going to like burn sage and like come up with this potion, and do all this stuff that's like totally has, it's totally foreign to the Western scientific mind.
Yeah.
But they are creating an unstable admixture of spiritualism and sort of like Western materialism, and so these are the materialist magicians that Lewis describes.